What would you do if you attacked what looked like an easy target and it killed you instead? You're a fighter pilot. You've trained for years, you've shot down enemy bombers before. Bombers are slow, predictable, vulnerable. You approach from behind, line up your guns, fire a burst, watch the bomber burn and fall. Easy, you've done it dozens of times. Then you attack a new type of bomber, American B-17. You approach from the rear like always. But before you can fire, tracers fill the air. Machine gun fire from angles you didn't expect. Your wingman explodes. Your engine is hit. You're not hunting anymore. You're trying to survive. You break off shaking and watch as your squadron, fighters that were supposed to destroy these bombers easily, gets torn apart by defensive fire from planes that were supposed to be helpless victims. This is the story of how German pilots laughed at the B-17 flying fortress when they first saw it, calling it a fat, slow target that would be easy prey. Then they attacked formations of B-17's, bristling with 1350 caliber machine guns each, flying in combat boxes designed to create overlapping fields of fire so dense that approaching them was like flying into a wall of lead. Entire Luftwaffe squadrons were shredded. Ace pilots died. The confident hunters became the terrified prey. This is about what happens when you underestimate defensive firepower, when tactical superiority meets strategic design, and why sometimes the side that looks vulnerable is actually the side that will kill you. The choice between attacking or breaking off determined who lived and who died. And what German pilots learned about the B-17's defensive capabilities changed aerial warfare forever. Over-occupied France. A Luftwaffe fighter squadron, Bf-109's, the best fighter aircraft Germany has, receives orders to intercept American bombers approaching a German industrial target. The squadron commander, an experienced pilot with 15 kills, briefs his men. The Americans are sending B-17 bombers. Intelligence reports describe them as large, four-engine bombers carrying heavy bomb loads. They're slow. Maximum speed around 287 mph compared to the Bf-109's 386 mph. They're unescorted. Allied fighters don't have the range to escort bombers deep into occupied territory yet. The briefing is optimistic. These are ideal conditions for fighter attacks. Intercept the bombers before they reach the target. Attack from the rear where bombers are traditionally most vulnerable. Destroy as many as possible. Force the rest to turn back. It should be straightforward. The squadron takes off, climbs to altitude, spots the bomber formation. 12 B-17's flying in a tight formation, maintaining altitude and speed, heading toward the target. The Luftwaffe pilots position themselves for rear attacks. The standard tactic. Come in from behind and slightly below, where the bomber's tail gunner has limited field of fire. Rake the bomber with 20mm cannon fire, destroy engines or kill the crew, move on to the next bomber. The squadron commander signals attack. 6 Bf-109's dive toward the B-17 formation from behind. They're expecting return fire. All bombers have tail guns, but B-17's are supposed to be American bombers, and American equipment has been inferior so far. This should be manageable. Then the defensive fire starts, not just from tail guns, from everywhere. Tracers arc from the top of the bombers, from the sides, from positions the German pilots didn't know existed. The formation's defensive fire is coordinated. 12 B-17's means 156 machine guns pointing in different directions, creating overlapping fields of fire. A Bf-109 can't approach from any angle without entering someone's field of fire. The lead German fighter flies into a stream of 50 caliber rounds. His canopy shatters. His engine explodes. He's dead before he can process what happened. The second fighter takes hits in the wing and fuselage. He breaks off, trailing smoke. The third fighter manages to fire a burst at a B-17 before defensive fire rips through his aircraft. He bails out. The remaining 3 fighters break off the attack without firing. The squadron commander is stunned. They approached 6 fighters against 12 bombers, favorable odds, and lost 3 fighters without shooting down a single bomber. The bombers continue to their target, drop their bombs, turn around, fly home. The Luftwaffe squadron lands. The debriefing is confused and angry. What happened? Pilots describe machine gun fire from unexpected angles. The bombers weren't defenseless. They were bristling with guns. Attacking them wasn't like attacking other bombers. It was like attacking a flying fortress, which is literally what the Americans called them. Flying fortresses. The name suddenly makes sense. The squadron commander writes a report. American B-17 bombers have significantly more defensive armament than expected. Standard rear attack tactics result in unacceptable losses. New tactics required. This report reaches Luftwaffe command. It's filed, noted, but not taken seriously enough, because surely once German pilots adapt their tactics, these American bombers will be vulnerable like all bombers. Right? Let's understand what German pilots were facing. A B-17 Flying Fortress carried 13 50 caliber M2 Browning heavy machine guns. Twin guns in the top turret, twin guns in the ball turret underneath, twin guns in the tail, single guns in the nose, waist positions on both sides, and later models added a chin turret. Each gun fired approximately 800 rounds per minute. Each round was a 50 caliber bullet, half an inch in diameter, heavy, fast, capable of punching through aircraft aluminum easily, destroying engines, setting fuel tanks on fire, killing pilots. 13 guns times 800 rounds per minute equals 10,400 rounds per minute of defensive fire from one B-17. Now put 12 B-17s in a combat box formation, a tight formation where bombers protect each other with overlapping fields of fire. That's 120,800 rounds per minute filling the airspace around the formation. No fighter pilot can survive flying into that volume of fire. The math is brutal. Even if the gunners are only moderately accurate, hitting 1% of their shots, that's still 1,248 rounds per minute striking attacking aircraft. A fighter aircraft hit by even a few 50 caliber rounds is damaged or destroyed. Hit by dozens, obliterated. The German pilots attacking B-17 formations were flying into a statistical certainty of being hit. This wasn't about pilot skill. This was about probability. Approach the formation, get hit. It's math. But German pilots didn't understand this immediately. They thought they could use better tactics. Attack from angles the gunners can't cover. Attack in coordinated waves to overwhelm the gunners. Attack with more fighters to absorb losses while still shooting down bombers. These tactics helped. Attacking from head-on was more effective because early B-17 models had limited forward armament. Attacking in large numbers allowed some fighters to survive long enough to shoot down bombers, but the loss ratios were terrible. To shoot down one B-17, the Luftwaffe was losing 2 or 3 fighters. And America was producing B-17s faster than Germany could shoot them down while producing fighters faster than Germany could replace losses. The mathematics of attrition favored America. Here's a specific example that shows what German pilots experienced. October 14, 1943, the second raid on Schweinfurt. 291 B-17s attacked ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt, Germany, deep inside German territory, beyond fighter escort range. Luftwaffe Command commits massive forces, over 300 fighters, to destroy the unescorted bomber stream. This is the scenario Germany has been hoping for. American bombers without fighter protection, vulnerable to concentrated fighter attacks. The Luftwaffe attacks in waves. Bf-109s and Fw-190s come from all directions, above, below, head-on, from the sides. The bomber formations tighten, creating walls of defensive fire. German fighters press attacks. B-17s catch fire, explode, drop out of formation. But German fighters are blown apart in mid-air, shredded by 50 caliber fire, collide with each other trying to avoid the defensive fire. The air is full of debris, pieces of aircraft, parachutes, smoke trails. When it's over, the Americans lost 60 B-17s out of 291, about 20%. Horrific losses that suspend deep raids temporarily. But the Germans lost 38 fighters destroyed and dozens more damaged, over 10% of the attacking force. Crucially, the Luftwaffe lost experienced pilots who can't be replaced easily. Germany is running out of trained pilots. Every loss matters. And the Americans, despite the terrible losses, proved something. B-17 formations can fight their way to targets deep in Germany, survive concentrated fighter attacks, drop their bombs. and most of them make it home. The defensive firepower works. It's costly, but it works. From the German pilot perspective, attacking B-17 formations is terrifying. A Luftwaffe pilot named Heinz Knoke wrote in his diary about attacking B-17's. The fortresses fly in close formation. When we attack, every gun on every bomber fires at us. The tracers are so thick you could walk on them. Fighters explode all around me. There is no way to approach without being hit. You make your attack, fire your weapons, pray you survive long enough to break away. I watch friends die every mission. We know we're going to die eventually. It's just a question of when. This is the psychological state of Luftwaffe pilots by late 1943. Not confident hunters. Doomed men fighting because they're ordered to. Watching comrades die, knowing their turn is coming. Think about that psychological shift. In 1942, Luftwaffe pilots were confident. They dominated the skies over Europe for years. They were skilled, experienced, flying excellent aircraft. American bombers looked like easy targets. By late 1943, those same pilots were terrified of B-17 formations. What changed? The bombers improved slightly. Later models had more guns, better armor. But mainly, the Germans learned through bitter experience that attacking B-17 formations meant high probability of death. The defensive firepower wasn't theoretical. It was real, constant, devastating. Every attack lost fighters. Every mission killed pilots Germany couldn't replace. The hunters had become prey. I want to pause here and ask you something genuinely, because I think this applies to more than just aerial combat. Have you ever underestimated someone or something because it looked vulnerable, then discovered they could defend themselves better than you expected? Maybe in business, sports, an argument, anything. What was that moment like when you realized your assumption was wrong and you were actually the one in danger? Drop your story in the comments, because I'm curious how often we misread situations where what looks weak is actually strong in ways we didn't anticipate. The B-17's defensive capability came from several design decisions that worked together. First, crew positions. 10 crew members, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, top turret gunner, radio operator, ball turret gunner, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner. 8 of these 10 could operate defensive weapons. That's 8 sets of eyes watching for fighters, 8 people firing guns from different positions covering different angles. Second, the 50 caliber Browning M2 machine gun was the perfect weapon for this role. Heavy enough to destroy fighters with a few hits. Fast firing enough to fill airspace with bullets. Reliable enough to keep working in freezing temperatures at 25,000 feet. American industry could produce them in massive quantities. Third, the combat box formation turned individual bombers' defensive fire into collective defensive fire. Bombers flew close together, 50 to 100 feet apart, so their fields of fire overlapped. A fighter attacking one bomber was being shot at by 5 or 6 bombers simultaneously. The combat box formation was strategic genius. It required discipline. Flying that close for hours while under attack was psychologically demanding. It required training. Crews needed to maintain position precisely, or the formation's defensive capability degraded. But when executed properly, it transformed vulnerable individual bombers into a nearly impenetrable defensive formation. German fighters that approached combat boxes from any angle faced multiple bombers' guns firing simultaneously. The only way to reduce losses was to not attack. But not attacking meant bombers reached their targets, dropped bombs on German industry, and flew home. Germany couldn't accept this, so Luftwaffe pilots attacked despite horrific losses, dying to stop a bombing campaign that was destroying their country. By 1944, the strategic situation shifted further against Germany. American P-51 Mustang fighters entered service with range to escort bombers all the way to targets deep in Germany. Now, B-17 formations had fighter escort. German pilots faced a terrible choice: attack the bombers and get shredded by defensive fire plus attacked by escort fighters, or ignore the bombers and watch German cities burn. Either choice led to German defeat. The Luftwaffe tried attacking with heavily armed fighter variants designed to shoot down bombers from beyond defensive gun range. These heavy fighters were slow and vulnerable to American escort fighters. Germany tried using jets, the Me-262, which could outrun American fighters and attack bombers with rockets. Too few were produced too late to matter. Germany tried ramming attacks, pilots intentionally colliding with bombers, sacrificing themselves to bring down the bombers. Desperation tactics that achieved little. The numbers tell the story starkly. From 1942 to 1945, the U.S. 8th Air Force lost approximately 4,750 B-17's to all causes: combat, accidents, mechanical failure. That's horrific losses. But in the same period, Luftwaffe day fighters lost over 15,000 aircraft and pilots. The exchange rate initially favored Germany. Each B-17 shot down cost the Luftwaffe maybe one fighter. But by 1944, each B-17 shot down cost 3 or 4 German fighters, and Germany couldn't replace them. American industrial production replaced lost B-17's within weeks. German industrial production couldn't keep pace with losses. The B-17's defensive firepower created a war of attrition America could win, and Germany couldn't. Let's talk about what it was like to be a B-17 gunner, because their experience was equally terrifying. You're sitting in a cramped turret or position, surrounded by thin aluminum, at 25,000 feet, where the temperature is 40 degrees below zero, wearing an oxygen mask because the air is too thin to breathe, and enemy fighters are attacking. Your job is to track the fighter with your guns and fire when it comes in range. But tracking is difficult. Fighters approach at high speed. The bomber is maneuvering to evade. Your turret is vibrating from the plane's engines. You fire bursts, watching tracers arc toward the fighter. Sometimes you hit, often you miss. Meanwhile, the fighter is firing 20mm cannon at you, and if a cannon shell hits your position, you die instantly. You watch fighters explode from other gunners' fire. You watch other bombers in your formation catch fire and fall. Men you ate breakfast with this morning are burning to death right now, 200 feet away, and you can't help them. You just keep firing at fighters until they break off, or you die. B-17 gunner casualty rates were horrific. Waist gunners and ball turret gunners had the highest casualties. Their positions were most exposed. Many gunners didn't complete their required 25 missions before being killed or wounded. The men who did complete tours were often psychologically damaged by what they'd experienced. But their defensive fire kept formations together. When gunners killed attacking fighters, they protected not just their own bomber, but the entire formation. Every German fighter destroyed was one less fighter attacking the formation. The defensive system worked because gunners did their jobs under impossible conditions. Here's what the B-17's defensive firepower did strategically. It made daylight strategic bombing viable. Before B-17's, bombers needed fighter escort or flew at night to reduce losses. The British Royal Air Force bombed Germany at night because daylight raids were too costly. The Americans insisted on daylight precision bombing, flying in daylight to see targets and hit them accurately. This was only possible because B-17 formations could defend themselves well enough to survive missions. Not without losses. Losses were terrible, but survivable in the sense that enough bombers got through to destroy targets, and enough crews survived to keep flying missions. This capability, daylight strategic bombing of industrial targets, crippled German war production. Factories destroyed. Oil refineries destroyed, transportation infrastructure destroyed. The German economy strangled by precision bombing that was only possible because B-17's could fight their way to targets and back. The Luftwaffe's response evolved from confidence to desperation to defeat. Early 1942. American bombers are vulnerable. Standard tactics will destroy them. Mid-1943. American bomber defensive fire is heavier than expected. We need new tactics and more fighters. Late 1943. Attacking B-17 formations results in unsustainable losses. We need heavier armament and different approach angles. 1944. We're losing 3 fighters for every bomber we shoot down. We can't sustain this. 1945. We have no fuel, few experienced pilots, and cannot stop the bomber offensive. This progression from confidence to desperation mirrors the strategic defeat of Germany's air defense. What connects this to modern thinking is the lesson about underestimation and assumptions. German pilots assumed bombers would be vulnerable like previous bombers they'd fought. They were wrong. The B-17 was designed specifically to survive fighter attacks through overwhelming defensive firepower. By the time German pilots realized their assumptions were wrong, they were dying in large numbers. How often do we make assumptions about competitors, opponents, challenges, assuming they'll be vulnerable in ways they're actually prepared for? The B-17 looked vulnerable. Big, slow, designed to carry bombs, not fight fighters. But it was designed to defend itself, and that defensive capability was the difference between strategic bombing working or failing. There's also a lesson about collective defense. One B-17 alone was vulnerable. 12 B-17s in a combat box were nearly invulnerable. The formation multiplied each plane's defensive capability. This principle, strength through coordination and mutual support, applies broadly. Individual members of a group might be weak, but the group operating with discipline and coordination becomes strong. German fighters attacking individually or in small groups got destroyed. The formation's collective firepower overwhelmed individual attackers. This is strategy. Design systems where the whole is greater than the sum of parts. Two more stories are on your screen right now. One about another weapon that was dismissed until it proved devastating. PT boats in the Pacific. One about overconfidence leading to disaster, the charge of the Light Brigade. Watch both. See the pattern of underestimation and assumption leading to catastrophe. Because confidence based on incomplete information is dangerous, confidence should match reality, not hope. Thanks for watching this far and thinking about assumptions, defensive capability, and why what looks vulnerable might actually be strong in ways you haven't considered. If this story changed how you think about underestimation or why defensive systems matter, hit that like button. Your engagement helps others find these stories about strategic thinking and battlefield innovation. Subscribe for more history, showing how wars are won by people who design systems that work, rather than people who assume their opponents are weak. Your comment or like helps someone else discover that the thing that looks like easy prey is actually the thing that will destroy you. See you in the next one, where we'll explore more moments when hunters became prey and assumptions met reality with deadly consequences.